Thank you for joining us today. My name is Bill Baker, and we're pleased to have you joining us for this Crisis Coach webinar that is part of the 2017 series hosted and sponsored by the RenWeb Group. Today we're going to be talking about benchmarking preparedness. How do we know if we are ready? We at Firestorm would like you to have us our friend on Facebook. Firestorm Solutions is our name there. On Twitter, you can reach us at Firestorm Soul. There is a hashtag. That hashtag is Crisis Coach. Firestorm transforms crisis into value and empowers you to manage risk and crises. Firestorm expertise is crisis management, critical decision support, crisis communications, crisis public relations, and consequence management. We advise you, though, that this presentation is not complete without the accompanying oral comments and discussion. This information should be read in conjunction with advice from your organization's personal counsel. In addition, this is not to be considered legal advice or legal opinion. RenWeb has been a good friend of Firestorm now for several years and presenting these monthly webinars at no fee to their clients and their friends. And we're delighted that they're able to continue to promote this throughout 2017 once again. Scott is not able to join us today. He is out working with customers. Normally he would make nice comments about how RenWeb is doing with their school management software. Our moderator, presenter today is Karen Masullo. Karen is Firestorm's very own Chief Intelligence Officer. She's the Executive Vice President. She has extensive experience in social media monitoring, training and emergency response, crisis communications, all of those marvelous things. And we're delighted that Karen is able to be our presenter today. So without further ado, over to you, Karen.
Thank you so much, Bill. I am sitting in today for the ever beautiful and humorous Jim Satterfield. Jim sends his regards. He is in a very small, remote area of North Carolina on a project, and they have very weak internet access there. So he misses you and hopes to speak to you soon. So we put a pretty picture of him so you can remember just how pretty he is. Thank you to our moderator, Bill Baker. If you have any questions during this session, Bill will be happy to field those for you. You can use the GoToWebinar dashboard. Generally, it should be presented on the right-hand side of your screen. It has a chat feature in it. You can type a question, and if we are unable to get to that on today's session, Bill will forward that to me or to an appropriate person, and we'll make sure to get your question answered, any comments, etc. You can send any information to webinars at firestorm.com. If you have any other question, remember that you do have available to you something we're going to discuss today, an assessment that we're happy to help you along with. It's an hour, it's no fee, and it's underwritten by the fabulous folks at RenWeb. We are very excited and happy to kick off 2017 with this January session that simply says, let's start from the beginning. We worked really hard over the last couple of years putting our programs and plans in place. So now we need to take a step back and let's go ahead and look at where we are. We're going to benchmark our preparedness so that we know if we're ready or if there are any gaps in our plans and programs that we do indeed need to address. So we want to ask ourselves, are we ready? Are we sure we're ready? And how indeed do we know? And I think it's important to understand that when we say, can you identify your organization's next crisis? Well, we can. Well, so can you. We're not futurists. What we are going to do, however, is walk through a process of analysis of current threats and risks. We're going to figure out where the gaps are so that we can take the time when we have the time to plan and prepare, or to predict, plan, and perform, and then get creative and think of other things that may occur that we can predict, plan, perform for. And it's not a matter of the literal event that may occur, but if we plan for a spectrum of events, if we are prepared with plans, programs, communications, and other tools and resources, no matter what happens, at least we'll have a base to start up from rather than nothing at all. We want our people to respond calmly in a crisis and to look to leadership with confidence and trust, because you as management in your schools, whatever your role may be, you know that there is an expectation of management of risk. If my child is attending one of your schools, I ask myself, is my child going to be safe at your school? And when I ask you, are you sure? How do you know? I don't just want an answer, well, we know, we figure we are, right? I want to see that you, your leadership, and your board understand your risk management processes. I want to know and feel confident that you have used some methodology to correctly evaluate your risks. It does me no good for you to tell me you have an active volcano plan if your school is not in Hawaii. If your school is in Ohio, an active volcano plan does not instill a sense of trust and confidence. So let's make sure your risks are correctly evaluated. I want to know that you have an evaluation and reporting process for those key risks. Does information go to disparate places and nobody actually knows where it is or brings it together? I want to know that you have a way that you can review the control process of these risks. And you do that at regular intervals because things change. If you haven't looked at your plan or program since 1996, things have changed. You might have new buildings. Old buildings that were considered aren't there anymore. You might have put in new windows, new security. You might have done that in the past 8 months. So we always have to periodically look back and say, what has changed? What do we need to add and modify? I need proof that your system of internal controls is operating effectively. How are you going to test that? And I need to know that you have some oversight, some insight and oversight into the monitoring of risks and threats in your organization. And what we're going to talk about today is not only why we measure our preparedness, but also, more important, what we measure, and then the most important is how do we measure. So why do we measure? Well, first of all, how do you know if your organization, your school, your campus, your facility can survive a disruption or a crisis? We've seen, sadly, far too many instances of disruptions and crises on school campuses over the past year. Most recently, my alma mater, The Ohio State University, had a significant incident on campus. I don't know if in their plans and crisis scenario documents that they had practiced or discussed what will we do if someone uses a vehicle as a weapon. As soon as we saw a vehicle used as a weapon outside of this country, driven into a crowd of people, every organization needs to get together and say, what are we going to do if that happens in our campus, on our streets, on our facility? Who gets injured on any main wall if someone could drive a vehicle through and into any of the main walls that lead from the parking lot? Where are we vulnerable? We need to discuss those things. Don't want to, but we need to. So where does your organization stand today with regard to discussing a disruption or a crisis? You know, Firestorm uses a hazard matrix: guarded, elevated, and severe. A guarded crisis is one that it causes a brief interruption or disruption. You may have some challenges. Your website might go down for a couple of hours. By the way, I think I've mentioned to you, in any incident that we've seen at any school of any type on their campus or within their buildings over the past 6 years, immediately their website crashes, because your website is used to getting maybe 5,000 to 10,000 visits in a month. Suddenly, within an hour, you're going to have 1 million. It has everyone on social media, the 95 million people from there. You're going to have media and others looking for updates on your website. And your website's going to crash if you have not done load testing and have a backup server with a dark website on it specifically for emergency and information management messaging. And that's why we love technology that allows you to do that. RenWeb is a great supporter of your ability to communicate effectively to your constituency, and those are critical factors when a crisis erupts. So when you look at these types of issues and trends and problems, how does your program need to improve based upon what we see happening in other environments? Also, let's look at the initiatives that you started in 2016. How are you doing on those? You know, if you're building a new gym and you're doing some risk analysis of what entry points are in that and how are you going to evacuate people from that, and you had a deadline that you wanted to have completion by October of 2016, did you do that? Do you have any resources left over? Did you have to redirect resources so you weren't able to complete that particular program on time because another crisis or event occurred? If another crisis or event occurs now, how will you adjust your current priorities and resources? Are your plans currently following best practices? And what should be your priorities? We're going to talk about that a little bit in a tool. And we're going to give you a tool, and usually within about 48 hours, 24 to 48 hours, a brief of this session will be posted on our website at firestorm.com/brief. And any of the pieces and parts of this that we show you today, they'll be in that document. So you'll be able to see how you can set up your own tool in order to track what should be your priorities. And then once you've looked at that, what are the gaps? Do a gap analysis. And a piece that many folks forget is, have we had the same conversation we're having with our teams, with our suppliers, our vendors, and the suppliers of our suppliers? Important that we make sure that everybody who's involved in the safety of our children, our teachers, parents, and community are working from the same blueprint. Or instead of blueprint, let's say they're working from the same map. You know, the more complicated the trip you're taking, and if we look at our continuity plans as just that, the more complicated a trip, then the better our roadmap or a blueprint has to be. So if you think about it as the destination we're going, where we're going, is a faraway place or a place that we've never been before. We have a few people coming with us, or as a matter of fact, we're going to meet a bunch of people at our destination. Our expectations are high. Let's say our timeline is very short. We set the destination, and then we have to seek input from expert sources who can tell us, well, you can take I-95, but there's a 10-mile stretch that's under construction, or there's a 10-mile stretch that's closed because of flooding. So here are 3 alternate routes you can take. Those expert sources are then going to help guide us in case something gets in our way that either is out of our control completely or wasn't part of the original planning. And they can help us set mile markers that measure our progress to greatly increase our chance of having a comfortable, safe, and efficient trip to our destination. We need a clear starting point. We need to know the distance between measured milestones. We need to understand our best and alternate routes, and then we need a way to measure our progress forward. So what should we measure? Well, based upon your goals and where you are with your program, ask yourself these questions. How do we demonstrate preparedness on a consistent basis, on a daily basis? How are we a preparedness organization? Do we have clear roles and responsibilities? If right now, today, something happened in your facility, say your HVAC system or your heating system, depending on where in the country you are, there's a school system right now, I think it's in Illinois, they had 800 children out with norovirus yesterday. If some of you don't have 800 children in your facility at any given time, imagine if 800 children and their families and their parents suddenly came down with the norovirus, and your teachers. Do you know what you would do next? Do you already have message maps written up? Can you post those on social media? Do you know how to get to your social media accounts? Or is that person out sick too? Do you have a backup to the backup on that? Do you have more than one person who has the keys to the kingdom when it comes to that? How are you going to communicate with local law enforcement, fire, your mayor? Do you already have someone designated to take care of those communications? Do you have a plan to review those communications prior to them being delivered? How are you going to work with local health agencies in order to assure that you're not assisting in the spread of norovirus? How are you going to assure your students are learning during the time they're ill? Do you have an alternate way to access web-based classrooms, computer-based learning? Who's going to do that teaching if your teachers are also ill? Are you aligned to best practices? Are you sure? Take that scenario, walk it through. And does your plan cover both what to do, okay, Janie, go write a communication, but does it also help that person know how to do it? Jim Satterfield has a story that I always think is so poignant. Years ago when he was working in New York, he was working at a company on 911, and all of the executives gathered into the decision room, and he was working with someone from the human resource area, and he said, let's go ahead and put a message out to all of our employees, and it was a big organization. He said, let's put a message to all of our employees, no matter where they are, and let's let them know if they want to go home, they can go home right now. Let's let them know if they want to leave, they can go ahead and leave. So the human resource representative, who was really shaken up, quickly dashed off a global email to everyone in the organization and said, if you want to live, leave. Well, Jim felt terrible because this person was very shaken up, very pressured, and to add on to her anxiety about what just had happened in the world, she's now devastated because she's accidentally sent out an incorrect message. That's very frightening and scary. And he learned from that and brings it to the table with him every day. When we craft message maps for people, there's a reason we do that ahead of time, because we don't ever want to put an employee in the place of compounding the stress they're already feeling in a situation by something like a simple typo. So, ask your newest hire. Look around your school. Who's that person you don't recognize? Go up to that person and say, hey, I'm curious. What would we do if we had a norovirus outbreak and almost all of our students, some of the parents, half of our teachers, and our vendors weren't able to get to our school was quarantined, any of those scenarios? Ask them what they would do. And if they said, well, I'll go over and get our crisis plan first, say, great, where is it? When they go over and get it and put it on the desk, then ask them, great, now what? And if it's going to take them 3 hours to read through to decide what to do, we have a problem. If they don't know their role or their ability to make decisions, we failed that person, and we don't want to fail people. So how should we go about doing this measurement? So we've asked our one person what they're going to do. We've gotten some feedback from them. Now let's go ahead and form a 3 or 4 person team. Let's have them read the plan objectively and talk to people just like we did our new employee, and conduct interviews to find out, are there gaps or vulnerabilities that we haven't even considered? You know, my team does a lot of monitoring for different schools across the country. We monitor social, traditional, and new media for public postings, open source comments that may present a risk or indicate that there's a behavioral threat of some type. I cannot tell you how many students and yes, even teachers are partying on the roofs of your buildings. We had one woman, a girl, who was laughing on social media because it was a very, very hot day out. So the tar on the roof was very soft. And she was laughing because the heels of her shoes, she had party shoes with her, her high heel shoes were making holes in the tar on the roof. We've seen people doing drugs, drinking excessive alcohol. Just the last thing you want is someone who's drunk on your roof who could possibly fall and injure themselves and, God forbid, kill themselves. So there are all kinds of crazy things. And please, I plead with you, Whenever you say to yourself, that could never happen in our school, please understand it not only could, but that every day at Firestorm we deal with a crisis situation with a school where it did happen. Everything from inappropriate contact with students to drug and alcohol abuse with students, not just students, but teachers involved in those types of things. So we help you look for those crises, but you've got to believe they can happen to you. Otherwise, you won't have a plan for it. If you don't believe it's going to happen, the day that you become a believer will be the day the media knocks on your door and says, hey, how did this happen at your school? So how are you going to identify risks? You know, when we say you need to look at your plan at least annually, please understand that we know there are parts of that plan that aren't going to change. You need to review it, make sure, okay, this is still pretty much the same. But there are other things that have changed, both to the physical nature of your environment, and also things may change based on funding, the political climate. When your board changes, the risk may change. When you have staff changes that may be introducing a new type of risk that needs to be identified, we need to inform, train, check. Have you done a thorough security assessment on both your people and property? How are you then monitoring for each identified risk or threat? How have you communicated to your students, teachers, parents, and others about your plan? One of the things I think is a really good, simple thing to do, it's January, let's do all of this from the beginning, is identify your social media accounts. Do you have a Twitter account? Do you have a Facebook account? Do you have an Instagram account? Are you using them? Even if you're not using them, you should own your name. You should have 3 deep on who knows the username and the password. You can use a tool to be able to manage multiple people who have access to the account. They have to be trained on how to use it properly. Call us. We can help with that. We can help with the selection of the tools. The reason is because I want you then to have your social accounts set up, be 3 deep, and then I want you to go talk to your local mayor's office, your chamber of commerce, your responding police precinct, your responding fire department, and let them know you're on social media, and if there is a crisis or a risk, you'd like to be able to use social media to help educate and manage the crisis, and you could use their help. And it's a great initiative. It's a great way to work with local law, police, and others to clearly and correctly manage the message. You cannot rely on other people to manage your messaging for you. And if there's one thing we've learned from politics in the last month or so, is that social media can certainly be used to not only manage the message, but to do a little step around the media. Is every component in your plan tested? And this is most important. Does every activation or exercise have a hot wash afterward? So I want you to think back to the last time your school had a crisis. It could be a small disruption. It could be something that was elevated and had you pretty worried. It could be something very severe. Maybe you had a hurricane or a flood or an ice storm or a norovirus outbreak. I want you to think back through that, how you managed that crisis then once it was over, did you all sit down and say, hey, where did our plan fall through? Where did we succeed? Did we accidentally put someone in a role they weren't comfortable with? Can we shift that now? We're not doing a hot wash in order to point out people who didn't perform well. We're using it as an opportunity to put them in positions where they have a chance to excel. I have to tell you, I've been in some situations that were crises before. My husband and I were talking about this at dinner, and we talk about fight, flee. My brain just went quiet. The reason my brain just forgot what I was talking about is because when it gets to flee, that's me. I see trouble and I'm like, okay, I'm going to go over here and deal with it from this side. There are other people, God loves them, who jump into the fray and run toward the fight. I'm not a freezer. I don't freeze. That was the third part of it. So we need to make sure that we're putting people in a position where they can do well. And this is not something that they have control over. So it's great that we have the opportunity to sit back and look at that and decide through a hot wash if we've made the right decisions. And if not, we have a chance to correct those before a significant crisis occurs. We need to start by doing a thorough assessment. So let's think of this thorough site assessment. If you have a huge campus with multiple buildings, your chief risk officer and your chief security officer should be working together on a regular basis to analyze these different parts and pieces. What is most important in that regard is that all of these people are talking to each other, so that from the highest level in your university or school system is talking to everyone external to that position and internal to that position, so everyone is on the same page. If you have procedures and policies for how you speak, for an example, to the media in a crisis, does your board know that program and plan? If they don't, then it's our fault if they speak to the media in a crisis because we haven't trained them on our plan, or they have a different plan. So we need to make sure the larger an environment, the more fractured it may become. But even smaller environments where you may have only 400 students on your property. We say only 400, that's a lot. We have visitors to our property who we have to make sure are safe in a crisis. We have vendors on our property who need to know what our plans and programs are. We have new employees, we have teaching assistants, we have other visitors. So we have to look at our building security, the access control, exteriors, key systems, sightline, surveillance. So many schools are struggling with what kind of glass do we use today? Do we even have glass in our buildings anymore? We use key access, we use metal detectors, we have all of these different ways to get in and out of our buildings that's secure, but yet we still see incidences across the country of schools that have had the same safeguards in place become compromised. So we have to plan for that. We know that RenWeb is a state-of-the-art communications platform, so we're going to go to RenWeb when we have questions around that. What about information technology, social media monitoring? You got us? You have us for all of these pieces, but I like that part, so I want to talk to you. How about loading docks, your lighting, your parking areas? Do you allow tailgating? And by tailgating, I mean when your vendors come to, let's say, deliver supplies to your cafeteria, if I follow in behind someone with a dolly wheeling in ketchup to your cafeteria, and I look kind of an official, and I have today's version of a clipboard in my hand, which would be my iPad, can I just follow that person in, or will someone stop me and say, what are you doing here, and look at my credentials? I will tell you, based on our experience, 9 times out of 10, we tailgate in behind that person and are not stopped. Recently, Jim Satterfield and Susie Laughlin ended up in the middle of a highly secure area in a facility we were doing work for, and proved that all of the safeguards they had in place could easily be stepped around without threats, just by looking official. Have you checked your perimeter barriers and controls? Have you looked at the history of previous security breaches and incidences to develop a trend profile? This is really important to me. I think it should be important to all of you. In our Behavioral Risk Threat Assessment program, in our BRSA program, we talk about what good is it if everybody is reporting a behavioral incident with a specific student or specific staff member if all of those reports go to different places and never meet. When I go to look at the trend, I can't see it. I just see the 1 or 2 reports that I may know where to find. But if your resource officer is filling out 1 report in paper and a student is anonymously reporting via a web application, and an administrator is documenting a report in a database, and those don't talk to each other, then we have a problem, and that needs to be fixed. How about your security personnel? How about those resource officers? Is it your security force, or is it contracted? Are they following your program, or the best advice and policies and procedures of the organization that actually hired them? How about when it comes to hiring? How are you doing your background checks? Are they done only at hire? Are they done annually? Or do you have a system in place where you're kept updated if an incident occurs with a current employee? How about a former employee that goes on to work in another location and it is found out there is a history of abuse? How do you step back and say, this person worked for me for 4 years? Did something occur in my facility on my watch that I'm not aware of? How do I respond to that? And you need to measure against the best practices of programs that currently exist. And the components that you're going to look at are whether your program framework is inclusive of a risk assessment, a school and workplace violence assessment. You are a workplace and you are a school. You have behaviors of concern and intelligence monitoring as subgroups under that. Your total security profile, your human resources, department practices, policies, and procedures, your documented emergency response coordination, notification systems, and your overall crisis communications. And as you look at each of these key pieces and the sub-parts, each component needs to then be evaluated for its completeness. And we advise that you use a simple, keep it simple methodology. We are going to give you a couple of examples. You can have this nice simple rating key. Green is good, right? Green is go. So that's for, it's documented, it's good. We're good to go on that. Another, you might be, well, we've talked about this. We know conceptually what we're going to do. We just haven't documented it yet. Good. That's verbal. Incomplete, well, you know, we kind of got an idea of what we're supposed to do. It needs more research. It's lacking in detail. So good. That's on your list of we really need to pay attention to this. And then U is not in place. We have no evidence of this in our program. As a matter of fact, we didn't even know that we needed this in our program. We are surprised. we probably need to identify resources in order to put that in our program, and we can help you identify those gaps. In your plan, if you're meeting best practice, the components of the plan that are written in alignment with best practices are actionable. It doesn't tell you just what to do. It tells you how to do it. Your content is comprehensive, and it provides your stakeholders, your friends that you teach with, that you work with on a daily basis, your students, with a clear understanding of their roles, responsibilities, and actions within that plan. Plans, for example, following best practice. A good example of that is the standard response protocol. The standard response protocol, like the incident command system, has a specific vocabulary with it, but then it also allows flexibility for your unique organization and situation. And there are 4 specific actions that can be performed during any incident. We have lockout, lockdown, evacuate, or shelter. The SRP differentiates between lockdown, which is interior doors only, and lockout, which is exterior doors only. Then the majority of existing plans don't make that distinction. So we recommend using the SRP as a best practice. The SRP protocol is used in about 5,000 schools countrywide, and you can learn more at iloveyoguys.org, or let us know. Send an email to webinars@firestorm.com, and I'll direct that to Jim Satterfield for you, and he can respond specifically to you. But learn more about that. And you can come up with, this is another coding system you can use. So you have, the complete system, incomplete, undocumented, or revised. And here then are very specific components that we need you or ask you to look at. So you want to start with your board policy. Is it complete? Where is it located? Has your board been trained with your team on this policy? And has it been tested in the real world? And we walk through everything involved, your budget for events and within this framework. The impact analysis on your school as a business. Crisis management, emergency response, your standard protocols. Crisis communication, behaviors of concern. Is it complete? Where is it? Are you trained on it? Have you tested on it? Your reunification plan. All of this has to be involved. So if you go to our website, sometime tomorrow, this document should be up, firestorm.com/brief. You should be able to download a copy of this, and this will give you a really great starting point on these 23 component parts of a program. Remember, the most important thing we can help you do throughout this year, and we're so excited to work with you for the next 11 webinars, is to predict, plan, and perform. We want you to understand your vulnerabilities, threats, and impacts of those vulnerabilities, and then develop policies, processes, and procedures that help you implement viable solutions through training and testing. Predict, plan, perform to build a comprehensive program. Now, next step. Talk to your senior leadership, to your board, regarding their strategic risk concerns. Then update your risk vulnerability threat analysis. Conduct a physical and technological security assessment. For plan, align your plans to best practices. For perform, request Firestorm facilitate a plan assessment and findings report. Again, because of the graciousness of RenWeb, anyone that would like to have that done, it's an hour-long conversation through a proprietary tool that we've developed. very high level, but gives you some great information. There's no fee for that because of RenWeb. If you just contact us either through a contact form on our website or at webinars@firestorm.com, we will get you scheduled for that plan assessment and findings report. I'd like to invite you to participate in our next Firestorm virtual exercise. We recognize that not everyone has the budget or resources or time to have an in-training where we can take a full day or 2 days to do comprehensive tabletop exercises, although those are highly effective and we love doing them. So what we've done is come up with this innovative way of allowing you to gather your teams in a conference room and participate in a 2-hour virtual stress test, a virtual crisis. It's coming up on February 2nd from 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern. You can go to our website at firestorm.com/events and look for February 2nd. We've had up to 1,000 organizations participate. Many of you on this call have sent me pictures of yourselves from last year, gathered around conference tables, listening to our scenarios, working with us, interacting with us on the stress test event. I've learned a great deal from them, and I hope you have too. And the subject of this one coming up is about the risks presented from live streaming, everything from sexting, cyber stalking, cyberbullying, and the risk to your brand, reputation, organization, and the health and well-being of your people through applications like YouNow, Periscope, Meerkat, Facebook Livestream. I think we saw in Chicago the 4 people, 18-year-olds who kidnapped a developmentally disabled person, beat him, and filmed it live on Facebook Livestream. We're going to see other things, and there's a loss of innocence that's going to be occurring that we need to be able to talk to our younger students about as well. So please, I encourage you to participate in that. And I'd like to see you analyze your current insurance coverage versus your current plans to see what your options and opportunities are in that regard. You can download the paper from this presentation at firestorm.com/brief sometime tomorrow. And we want to once again thank RenWeb, a fact company. We're thrilled for the next 11 sessions that we will have with you and your schools, and hope that we can present some timely information for you. Contact us at firestorm.com, webinars@firestorm.com, and if you would like to talk to the amiable and beautiful Bill Baker, who was our moderator today, you can call our 1-800 number, and Bill will answer the phone. Thanks for your time today. We look forward to talking to you next month or any time in between, and that will end our session for today. Goodbye.